Good afternoon, everybody. We'll just let some people in from the waiting room and we'll get underway in just a couple of minutes. Great. Great. Okay, I think we will commence. We've got people, lots of people still coming in from the waiting room, but we might get started. I'm Jess Roth. I'm the founder and director of the Social Impact Hub, and it's my great privilege to welcome you here this afternoon for this very special workshop in the RISE workshop series, where we are launching our social enterprise legal toolkit, which has been developed in collaboration with the Centre for Social Finance Law, with the support of 7th Street Ventures, specifically the Jacaranda Foundation, the philanthropic arm of 7th Street Ventures. It's been in development for a really long time, so we're really pleased to be sharing it with you all today. So I would like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land in which we're meeting, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. Many people are coming from all over Australia. So if you want to pop in the chat where you're joining us from and acknowledge the traditional owners and pay your respects to elders past, present, and emerging from wherever you're joining us, that would be lovely. And we can get a bit of a sense of who's in the virtual room today. Thank you all for joining us. So what we're going to do today is I will give you a little bit of background history and acknowledge some people. And then I'm going to hand over to Therese Cochrane, who's a wonderful member of our professional impact network. And she is going to give you some background to the development of the toolkit and the need we identified in the sector, and share with you many of the people who've been involved in developing it, because it really has been a team effort. That is an understatement. So I would like to, I'll hand over to Therese to give you that overview. And then we're going to have a fabulous panel discussion. And we're really, really privileged to have such talented panelists with us who not only joining us today, but have actually been really, really generous in their time in sharing their stories as part of the toolkit. And you'll see when we give you the tour of the toolkit that there are case studies as part of the toolkit. So there's a series of template documents, there's a series of information sheets, and there's a series of case studies. And both Too Good and Chuffed are featured as case studies in the toolkit. So you'll get to hear the insights today from our fabulous panelists, Rob and Prashan, telling the stories of Too Good and Chuffed and the legal challenges that they faced and how they overcame them and continue to overcome them. It's a present tense, it's a past and present. They're both running very successful social enterprises and continue to grapple with these issues. So we will hear from both of them, their stories and their challenges. And then we'll also hear from Michael Ryland, who has developed the template constitution, structure diagram and discussion notes that we're releasing today as part of Legal Toolkit. He will talk you through all of those documents and how they work, and we'll share the screen and give you a little tour around. We'll also have plenty of time for questions. Many of you submitted some really interesting questions as part of the registration process, and I want to thank you for that. Many of you want to know more about hybrid structures, so it's great we have Rob here who can talk to that on Too Good. We also have an information sheet on hybrid structures in the toolkit, so you can learn more about that. Many of you are at startup stage and you want to just work out what's the best structure for you. And we'll ask our panelists some questions about that as well. So thank you all for submitting the questions that you'd like asked as part of the registration, but don't feel restricted to that. Feel free to pop any other questions that you have into the chat, and we'll try and answer them as we go through today. So just pop them in the chat and I'll call on you to ask your question or ask it directly. We want this to be as interactive as we can, given the number of people on the call. And then we'll give you an actual tour of the toolkit and how you navigate around. It's all free, it's publicly accessible. We'll show you where it is and point you around at the end of today's session. So that's the plan. If there are any questions, don't hesitate, to pop them in the chat and we can answer those questions. It's wonderful to see where you're all joining from and all your acknowledgements of country. Thank you very much. Really appreciate that. Keep them flowing and we can get a sense of where you're joining from and acknowledge your country as we progress through today. I'm just going to tell you a tiny little bit about the Social Impact Hub. So we help change agents to accelerate impact. We have 4 main areas of our work. We do advisory work delivered through our fabulous professional impact network, which Therese is a member of. People who have many decades of experience and are now leveraging that experience for the benefit of the social sector. So we're really lucky to have that expertise. We design, support, demonstrate, and scale social impact. We run education programs that empower change makers. We do ecosystem building for change makers, and that's this project we see as part of the ecosystem building initiatives. We're trying to contribute to the growth of the social enterprise ecosystem, make it easier for you to navigate the legal structures and challenges. And so this is really a thought leadership project to contribute to the strength of the social enterprise ecosystem. And we focus on mobilizing capital for impact, both supporting impact investors to deploy their impact capital and also help social enterprises get ready for impact capital. And social finance is a theme that we explore in one of the information sheets, and is a subject of many other resources that the Social Impact Hub has. And one reason why this is such a great collaboration with Michael from the Centre for Social Finance Law. So that's a little bit about Social Impact Hub. I think I will now hand over to, sorry, this is not right. I want to thank our partners for this, this legal toolkit project, the 7th Street Ventures and Jacaranda Foundation. And this is part of the RISE workshop series, which is supported by the Paul Ramsay Foundation and also the Westpac Foundation. So I want to thank Westpac and Paul Ramsay for all of their support of the whole RISE workshop series. And this is just one in that series. And if you're interested in tuning into future RISE workshop series, you can do that. They're held every fortnight on a Friday. And we'll pop the link in the chat for the upcoming RISE workshop series. And you can register. I think there are 3 more RISE workshops that are published at the moment. So you can register for them. They're all free, subsidized by Paul Ramsay Foundation and Westpac Foundation. So you can join any of the upcoming RISE workshop series for free. And we hope many of you will join. So on that note, I'm going to hand over to Therese to give some background to the project and acknowledge all the people that have been part of developing it. As I mentioned, Therese is a member of our Professional Impact Network. She is no longer a practicing lawyer, but she is a former lawyer. And so she brings a lot of legal expertise to the project. She's also lived and breathed the charity space. And so it's meant that she really understands your pain, the pain of many of the social entrepreneurs that are on the call today, the pain of many of the not-for-profits trying to navigate this complex legal environment. So she really understands the need for the toolkit, and Therese has gone above and beyond, let me say, to bring this to life today. So I want to thank Therese for all of her hard work and hand over to her now. So please join me in welcoming Therese. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jess. What a lovely introduction. We are absolutely delighted to launch the Social Enterprise Legal Toolkit today. The toolkit has been in development for some time. The Social Impact Hub identified a gap in the online materials available in Australia relating to not-for-profit, for-profit, for-purpose organisations. As many of you will know, there are well-known paths for setting up charities and not-for-profits, but fewer resources available for those who want to set up a social enterprise to make profit for purpose. The legal toolkit does not cover setting up charities and not-for-profits. There are some excellent resources available to cover these issues. For example, Justice Connect and the ACNC. The area we're trying to cover is that area in between the charitable and the purely corporate. Other countries have set up special regimes, community interest companies in the UK and L3Cs in the US. In Australia, we've not taken that path. Without a specific social enterprise regime, we need to use the legal and regulatory building blocks available. Because we're in the in-between space, there is no standard approach. We want to help social enterprises just starting out. You will need legal, accounting and other advisors, but we wanted to provide some resources so that you don't have to continually reinvent the wheel. This project has been a collaboration with Michael Ryland from the Centre for Social Finance Law, ably assisted by Helen Way. Michael has provided an excellent template constitution and comprehensive guidance. The toolkit has been generously supported by the Jacaranda Foundation, the philanthropic arm of 7th Street Ventures. The project started some years ago. The foundation work was done by students from UNSW, attending the Social Impact Hub clinics and practicum. 3 different student groups worked on the project, undertaking valuable research and conducting interviews with various specialists and social entrepreneurs. While containing useful practical advice and legal resources, the toolkit comes alive through the case studies of successful social enterprises. We're grateful for the time and input provided by founders of social enterprises. We spoke with Prashant from Chuffed, Rob from Too Good, and Simon from Who Gives a Crap. Chuffed is an example of an enterprise that started as a charity. When the founders realised scale was vital, they decided to convert to a for-profit business model so that they could raise finance. Too Good is an example of a hybrid structure, a charity and a company operating side by side. Our other case study is Pollinate, which operates in several countries and shows how these principles can operate across borders. We have more case studies in the pipeline, so watch this space. The Who Gives a Crap case study will be added shortly. You will see that each story is different. There is no one-size-fits-all approach. We also obtained input from industry specialists. On finance issues, we spoke with CIFA, Social Enterprise Finance Australia, Foresters Community Finance, and a representative of the Commonwealth Bank. On social enterprise issues, we spoke with Social Traders and Justice Connect. We would like to thank them all for their time and valuable advice. We have distilled this research into a toolkit comprising information sheets, template documents, and case studies. The information sheets discuss the issues you will come across: choosing the right legal structure, hybrid structures, governance considerations, raising finance, and independent certification options. Michael has provided the legal input, the template constitution, the summary of the key provisions, and the discussion notes. And the case studies give practical context. We hope you find the toolkit a useful resource. Now I'd like to hand back to our panelists, Rob and Prashant and Jess. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Therese. Virtual clap. We can all clap, Therese. Thank you for all of your work and that wonderful overview of the toolkit. So we hope you'll stick around for the next hour to actually see it all on the screen. Thank you. So it's now my absolute privilege to introduce you to our panelists, and we'll begin the panel discussion. So as you heard, we have Prashan joining us, the founder and CEO of Chuffed. Give us a wave. If you haven't already heard of Chuffed, you should have. Chuffed.org is a crowdfunding platform. Hopefully many of you have donated through it, if not actually hosted projects on it. It's raised over $70 million for over 13,000 organizations. And we look forward to hearing from Prashan about how the journey of Chuffed and how you started life as a charity and then converted into a public benefit company and raising capital along the way. So thank you so much for joining us, Prashan. We're really privileged to have you, and thank you for your time in putting together the case study that's in the toolkit. So welcome, Prashan.
Well, thanks for having me, Jess.
I'd also like to welcome Rob Kaslik, the founder of Too Good Co. Rob is it's such a story. I mean, I want Rob to tell the story. From starting Australia's first organic soup kitchen and then establishing Too Good Co. to try and prevent needing to constantly fundraise. So he wanted to establish it as a company, but has a social mission at its core. And so we'll hear from Rob about the hybrid structure that Too Good has, and how the for-profit and the not-for-profit work alongside each other to deliver on your mission and help make a difference to women who are displaced from their homes, mostly due to domestic violence, and help them retrain and give them work opportunities. So what you do is really inspirational, and we look forward to hearing more about it today. Welcome, Rob.
Thanks, Jess. Thanks for having me.
And our third panelist is Michael Ryland, the Director of the Centre for Social Finance Law. Michael used to be a partner at Ashurst, and before that at Herbert Smith Freehills, and he has 35 years more of experience across corporate finance, investment funds, commercial law, and now is specialising in social finance, has worked with Social Impact Hub on a few projects. And I think I just saw Mike enter the room from the waiting room, which was Australia's first beneficial outcomes linked debt structure that we put together with Exceptional. And Michael did the legals for that, as well as some other projects, many other projects across disability, social and affordable housing, social infrastructure, lots of other projects with a particular focus on social finance. So thank you, Michael, for your collaboration on the toolkit, and welcome today.
Thank you, Jess.
Thank you. And our fourth panelist is Therese Cochrane, who I've already introduced, so I won't repeat, our wonderful Professional Impact Network member who has brought this toolkit to life. I also, just before I open the panel, do want to also acknowledge all of the Social Impact Hub staff that have been involved in pulling the toolkit together. Therese is on the panel today representing a whole army of people that have helped, from the UNSW students through to Mia Starrick, our collaboration manager, who had initial carriage of the toolkit. We want to thank Mia. Jay Bulkin, who's done all the tech and brought it all to life. Thank you, Jay. Jess, Kasha, there's been a lot of people involved. So thank you, Therese, for representing the Social Impact Hub team who have helped bring this to life behind the scenes. So thank you. All right, so let's get into it. Prashan, I'm wondering if we can start with you. And I'd love it if you could tell us a little bit about the history of Chuffed. Take us back to the beginning. Tell us why you decided to establish in the beginning as a not-for-profit.
Yeah, so my background's in the charity space. I've been working there for 5-6 years with a lot of different organizations. At that point in time, I was a consultant, kind of doing strategy with a whole range of small and large organizations. And the thing that I saw over and over again was that all the money in the sector was going to kind of like the top 20 large charities, but there was this huge, amazing tail of organizations that were starting up, that were small, that were struggling to get their voice heard and get money in the door. And we wanted to help them get money in the door. And at the same time, there were all our friends who were kind of like bankers, lawyers, and consultants, they were like coming to me, who was their kind of non-profit friend, and going, oh, like, can you like just stop people harassing me on my way to work every day at the train station? And that was like their main interaction with like the sector that I really like love being part of. And so they wanted to contribute, but like the way that the sector was engaging them just didn't fit. And so we very like naively thought, like, is there a way of like connecting all these people who want to contribute with all these great organizations that were out there? And we saw what was happening in the crowdfunding sector in the arts world, and we thought, hey, can we bring that into the nonprofit sector? And so we just kind of like started building with no structure at the start at all. We just had a project that we were just doing. And then at some point in time, we thought like we should probably put this into some sort of structure. And if you'd asked us at the time, like, you know, why did we choose a charity structure? We were told you kind of like something like, hey, we're not here to make money. We just want like it to be about the mission and what we're trying to achieve. But really, like, I think it was just because we were familiar with the charity structure, and because we'd advised a lot of charities, it was kind of like the sector that we were trying to help. We kind of knew where the money came from. Like when you understood, like we could raise money from foundations and trusts into that structure. And so like, I think it was actually just familiarity was like the main reason that we kind of chose the charity kind of structure initially.
That's so interesting. It was just what you knew.
Yeah, because like I wasn't like connected with that whole, you know, tech startup world at that point in time. So
yeah,
like starting as a PTY limited company just like seemed kind of strange and foreign to me.
Yeah. Okay. Really interesting. So then let's go forward a little bit. You were growing quickly and you needed to raise finance, and you realized that you couldn't really do that at sufficient scale as a not-for-profit. So tell us that moment and tell us all about what was going through your brain as you thought through the process and worked out and made the decision to change structures to become a for-profit and then actually raise equity investment from Blackbird Ventures. What gave rise to that shift? Tell us about that decision.
Yeah, so I mean, the context around this is that, so when we started Chuffed as a charity, we're very fortunate that we did get some money from the Telstra Foundation as a grant. We got 460 grand over 2 years, which is a lot of money when you're just starting off. But then as we kept on growing and opening up internationally, kind of like we're eating away at that money. So we're hiring people, and we got to the stage where, you know, we were, you know, we probably had 150 grand in the bank, and we were burning through at like 10K a month or so. And you kind of look at the runway ahead, and we had like opened up internationally at that point in time. So we realized like there was an actual business here, like we could get this to kind of profitable, but you know, if we're kind of just growing at a rate where we get a few, you know, extra $1,000 every month, we're not going to have enough capital there to fund any growth. And so we realized that we wanted to raise capital to be able to kind of grow the team fast enough so that we could get ahead of the market. But I couldn't really see a way of telling the story to trusts and foundations. So trying to get grants out because it was relatively easy to raise money when we were new and shiny. But then like telling the story of like, we're big and want to get bigger was harder. And then telling the story of like, we're huge and we want to get like mega huge was kind of nearly impossible to philanthropy. And so then that was kind of like the main driver in us going, well, I can't see how we would raise, you know, $5 million from philanthropy for doing what we're doing in particular, because we're like an infrastructure play. We're not direct service delivery. Like it's a very kind of like unsexy story to be selling to philanthropy. And so that was a point where we're like, well, if we're going to grow, keep on raising money, we're going to it's going to have to be equity, not grants. And so we had to kind of make the decision at that point to convert structure. But we were in this kind of thing. We're like, well, our purpose is why we started. We want to make sure that we kind of like maintain that purpose, even if we transition as well. So like that was kind of our thinking at that point in time.
Yeah, really interesting. And also really interesting that your purpose was one reason why you wanted to scale, because to further your mission, you wanted to be larger, right? Because then you can actually do more good. But interesting that that's a hard story to then tell philanthropy, even though it's highly leveraged in your case and challenging. Super interesting. Okay, well, I want to come back to that point, Prashant, about keeping the mission. I might just turn to Rob for a moment and we'll come back to you. Rob, so you have both a charity and a PTY Ltd, a proprietary company. You could say you have the best of both worlds. Tell us, how did you end up with both? Tell us about the history of Too Good and how you've ended up with both entities today.
Sure. So certainly it was no genius move or, the big idea at the start. We had a soup kitchen, organic soup kitchen in King's Cross. We had another program where we went into women's shelters and taught some young mums how to cook. And we had a rooftop garden, which we fundraised through Chuffed back in the day. And so then we got to a stage where the soup kitchen was going well. We were serving about 50 people each week. And then we thought, well, actually, we want to get to 1,000. So the soup kitchen was the Wednesday night of St. Canis's soup kitchen, which serves about 1,000 people each week. And it was an organic soup kitchen, not to be fancy, but just really to provide a place of dignity and respect. And we kind of thought, well, a lot of people coming on heavy recreational medicinal drugs, so let's just serve food that's as clean as possible. And we realized when you kind of do that, when you would provide a meal that you would eat, you actually share food and you create this space of dignity. And so the idea was, let's scale that. I was a full-time engineer at the time, and so another engineer and myself said, okay, why don't we do the Tom's Shoes model? Well, at the time that was kind of big back then, where we would sell a meal and donate a meal, but so we said, let's just pull a company off the shelf, created Too Good, with the using the profits of the meal sold to make a meal in the soup kitchen. And it kind of stumbled around a bit at the start, and then we ended up with, as both organizations started to grow, it was kind of like Rob from Too Good or Rob from, it was called Table at the time, and it was just lots of confusion and who's doing what, and that was so in the end we decided then, well, actually, if the mission is the same, if the outcome is the same, why don't we kind of rebrand to Too Good? And we had two entities, a foundation and a company. So that's how we end up with the two.
Great. Okay. Thank you for sharing that with us. Can you talk to us a little bit about the challenges or the tensions in operating the two entities side by side?
Yeah, sure. So the biggest thing for us is the governance and the inefficiencies in wanting to make sure that there's transparency and arm's length, so the additional bookkeeping. And while I always know, what entities what, and our GMs are making sure the whole of staff knows, and so there's certainly some inefficiencies in doing that. I am really grateful that we do have both entities, but there's a lot of inefficiency, especially as you mentioned, as we've grown and things have changed. And the reliance on having those two entities, or the desire to maintain those two entities to go for our mission is really strong. The ensuring that the governance between the two is there at arm's length is kind of the biggest tension, or the biggest risk, and where we spend a lot of our time on ensuring that the governance is strong.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, thank you. But overall, the pros outweigh the cons.
Oh, 100%. You know, I'd love to talk a bit later about, you know, I wouldn't have it any other way. It's certainly, yeah, it's certainly a path I'm proud of and I'm grateful for. I get mentored by Alan English, an amazing entrepreneur. And only last week, because, you know, as you mentioned, these things continue to come up and the struggle is, you know, that having the two entities, as amazing it is, you know, it's still, as we grow and new services become available, we kind of go into new areas like Ramsey, opportunities come up. And when you're an organization that has a mission of, you know, employing 60 women a year, every year, you know, within the next 3 years, it's kind of a bit different to, you know, selling a million widgets or having this kind of service delivery. And so with that, if that's your North Star, then, you know, I'll use the entities as best I can in order to get that. And so how that might happen often kind of creates a little bit of confusion, but perhaps a little bit more planning or upfront kind of understanding of levers that we have to pull in order for us to get there.
Fabulous. Okay, thank you so much, Rob. That's such an interesting insight. So there are many of you on the call who said you were specifically interested in hybrid structures when you registered. So I thought this might be a good point to just turn to Therese, who could tell us a little bit about the legal toolkit and how the toolkit can help social enterprises navigate some of the complexities of the hybrid structure.
Indeed, and I think it is can be quite a complex situation. So as I mentioned before, there is no one size fits all approach. So essentially hybrid just means you have, say, a charity, not-for-profit, and you have a corporate entity. So we set out in the information sheet relating to hybrids the issues that you will need to consider. And as Rob just mentioned, considering these things up front is probably going to save you time and effort later on. And it's really good to just have a clear idea of the relationship between those two entities. So also, of course, having two entities, you're going to double up on regulators. Not much you can do about that. Primarily, you would be establishing the charity so that you can access DGR status or tax concessions through the ATO. And then the corporate entity will allow you to issue shares and raise finance through equity finance. You also need to consider, I guess, how you'll have commercial relationships between the two entities and governance relationships. And those governance relationships, as Rob mentioned, can be absolutely critical. Just going back to the commercial, you can obviously keep the commercial activity within the corporate entity, and in some ways you can ring fence from the charity so that you can insulate the risk to some extent. Within commercial relationships, you might also have some form of licensing arrangements. If one entity, for example, has the intellectual property and licenses it to the other, and you will also be sharing a lot of assets, employees, office space, etc., etc. So again, it's good just to consider exactly who does what in this field. Now, the governance can be quite tricky because you will end up with separate advisory boards, board of directors. You'll have potentially conflicts of interest and confidentiality issues. So there's quite a lot to navigate in that area. The principles are all there. So it's the regular director's duties and the principles that you need to follow as a charity. But it's a very good idea to think about it up front and work out how you're going to manage all of these issues. So just to go to so in the toolkit, we have our hybrid section, which will set out all these issues for you. And also we have a more detailed section on governance considerations where we go into a bit more detail there. There's also some threshold issues you'll need to consider as well. For example, if you have a charity, you'll need to know whether it has the legal capacity to enter into the arrangement with the corporate entity. you will also be very careful about your DGR status. You won't want to do anything that could endanger your DGR status. So therefore, the hybrids will give you fantastic flexibility and many options for finance, but there is the added complexity as to how you do it. And as we mentioned, Rob has the two entities side by side. There's many other ways of doing it. Charities that own cafes or shops, or a regular business that owns a foundation. So hybrid just essentially means more than one. So we do hope that you can find some guidance from the information sheets, and we're delighted to be able to help. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Therese. That's brilliant. I think Rob shared with me in preparation for this session, he said, I wish this toolkit existed when I was trying to navigate some of these issues, right?
Absolutely.
Just helpful to think through some of these things at the beginning and some of the complexities. So thank you, Therese, for articulating that all so well. I'd love to come back to Prashan, if that's okay, and hear from you, Prashan, about that transition. So when you turned into a for-purpose, for-profit company, you had to change your constitution. And I'm really interested to hear how you locked your mission into your constitution, into your documentation, because you mentioned this challenge earlier, and I'd be interested to explore a little deeper that challenge of actually ensuring that you stayed focused on your mission, even while taking on mainstream investment from Blackbird Ventures, which is not necessarily an impact investment focused venture firm. And so how did you manage to navigate that tension and keep the mission front and center?
Yeah, I mean, at the time that we were going through this is back in 2015, there was no guidance on how to do this at all, really. So we had been a charity for a couple of years. At that point in time, we wanted to raise equity, and you can't obviously do that in a charity structure, or certainly not in a company limited by guarantee. And so we didn't really, we wanted to kind of make sure that everyone understood what we were about. So everyone, by everyone, I mean any investors that came into our cap table, they kind of like understood that there was a mission behind this organization and we'd get the right people in to that. And so we kind of had to, we spent a chunk of money on lawyers to try and understand how would you actually do that in a PTY limited structure. And then there were a whole bunch of issues on like, how do you transition from a charity and move all your assets from the charity into the PTY limited company. But let's talk about the actual structure itself. So the way that we kind of handled this issue is that we took a broad view on directors' duties. So I'm not a lawyer, please get legal advice on this, caveat. But our view is that the obligation for directors is to act in the best interest of the company as a whole. Now that's been taken to mean the financial interests of the shareholders, but I don't think that's what the intention necessarily of the Act is. And so the way that we got around this was that we defined what the best interest of the company was and defined it according to the purpose that we wanted the company to act towards. And then we locked that in with a clause in our shareholders agreement that essentially said you can't change that without 100% shareholder vote, which meant that at any time that the founders were still on the cap table, we could block any changes to the purpose or the statement that directors were responsible for the purpose. We also had, so in the transition process, we still have the charity structure. It is a significant shareholder of the company. And so we also had that as like a extra guarantee that the charity itself had to vote positively on any changes to that purpose or on any changes to the director's duties acting towards that purpose as well. So that's the kind of lock that we established, which in my opinion, I think is stronger than the asset lock in a charity. But happy to kind of like talk about that in more detail.
Yeah, really interesting. Okay, that's so interesting how you've brought mission lock into practice or implemented a mission lock in practice. And it's really multidimensional as well, the way that you've done it. So that's really interesting. I'd love to ask Michael to comment on that he's the lawyer amongst us. He's the lawyer. So I'm wondering if you can provide some commentary, Michael, on Chuffed's mission lock, and also maybe talk us through the model constitution that is part of the toolkit and how that contains a mission lock, and also what Prashant mentioned in relation to the control of the founders and how the founders can continue to keep mission front and center, and how you've proposed enterprises consider structuring that in terms of possibly founder shareholding, a special class of shares for founders, and how that might work, especially if there's not necessarily a charity structure that can become a shareholder of the company in the case of Chuffed. So the way the model constitution works is broader and hopefully more accommodating to a whole lot of people on the line today. So over to you, Michael. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, it was really interesting actually listening to Prashant describe how the mission lock works with Chuffed, because he picked up on all three key elements, which is first of all stating the mission in the constitution, but secondly dealing with the director's duties issues, and then the third one was embedding it in some way, which mentioned two things, particularly the amendment of the constitution, but also the charity having a substantial shareholder, because those really are the three key elements to trying to achieve making sure that the entity you set up can be both for purpose and for profit. The way we've done the model constitution is, first of all, we focus on the constitution because that's the governing document. So that's the place that's going to be the overarching guide to how the company is going to work. That plus obviously the Corporations Act and general law. What we've done in the model constitution is we've adopted the B Corp legal requirements to set out, first of all, have a purpose clause, and then have a stakeholder clause. And the stakeholder clause deals with some of the director's duties issues. The B Corp purpose clause is a generic one. It says the purpose is to deliver shareholder returns and overall positive impact on society and the environment. So that gives you a sort of an overall for purpose. The model constitution then allows or contemplates that you'll actually expand that with the more specific mission that actually particularly is relevant to you. So in Too Good, you'll talk about the achievement for the employment of women and so forth, and Chuffed for what you're doing with crowdfunding. Whatever, everyone's got their own mission. So it needs to be possible to spell that out within the constitution. What we've then done, and this goes to the director's duties point that Prashant mentioned, is that the concept that, which I agree with, the best interests of the company include acting for what the company's objectives are. Now there is a whole lot of overlay of law on that as to what best interests are, but if you can set out and state your mission clearly, the directors, that's the guide for the directors. And the way the stakeholder clause works is it says that when you are looking at the best interest of the company, when you're looking at fulfilling your objective, you take into account a range of different stakeholders, range of different factors. None of them has primacy. They will vary according to the particular situation or judgment call you've got to make, but they're all there to be considered. So that ensures that when directors are making their decisions in the best interest of the company, they are looking at the full range of issues, which includes the for purpose elements that need to be looked at. The third element then is embedding that in some way, so that it's not something that can just be ignored by directors or can be ignored by investors. The mechanism that we have put in the model constitution is governor members and governor shares, which is effectively, as Jess was saying, it's sort of like the founders. The people who are setting it up, people who are committed to the mission, they have certain special rights, and those rights ensure that, for instance, the constitution can't be changed without their approval. They have certain abilities in terms of appointing directors. They have certain rights in relation to a sale of the main undertaking, which is another way the mission could be changed. They have certain abilities, sort of caps on directors' fees and so forth. Those are ways of ensuring that it holds true to the mission in the way it actually operates, and they do that through voting rights. You'll sometimes see that people may have come across what's called a golden share. It's a very similar concept. It's a way of creating a particular shareholding right that helps to protect the mission, and that kind of corresponds to what Prashant was talking about with Chuffed and the substantial shareholder being the charity. That's achieving the same sort of objective. I'll stop there and throw back to you, Jess.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Michael. It was good to have the lawyer clarifying all of this. Really good. And I think kudos to Michael. You've done a great job in finding a way through the fact, given that there is no clear legal structure for social enterprise at the moment, right? And there's been no case law really on the matter. So given that we don't have any guidance really from the federal government in terms of defining a clear legal structure, social enterprise, as Therese mentioned, and we don't have any real guidance from the courts, you've done a really good job at trying to give sufficient guidance to all the social entrepreneurs on the call to take the template model constitution and adapt it for your purposes. There are also lots of great discussion notes that go with it that really help. So we'll talk through some of those at the end. So thank you, Michael. Great. All right. I'd love to come back to you, Rob, and maybe out of the legals for a minute into the practicalities, bringing it to life. Nothing ever goes according to plan.
Very true.
So perhaps you could tell us how your thinking on the governance and on the best structure evolved over time, and those are the sorts of things you might have wished you knew, and how plans changed as the time went on.
Yeah, so I said we started to as a buy one give one model, and as social entrepreneurs, we don't get in this really to to make the big dollars. It's really about impact. So it's with heart, and so we were, for every meal that we sold, we were donating another meal, within that transaction. And then we realized, that from the learning from the people that we were donating the meals were around their situation. And as we started to sell a few more meals, we wanted to hire the women from the shelters that we serve as a pathway out of homelessness. But I mean, if you go to a restaurant and order something and say, look, can I have another meal for what I purchased? And could you also start to employ people within your restaurant that have no experience with it at all? The business fails. So under the company structure, giving away a meal with every meal we sell, and then plus employing. So we have 3 chefs now, employing 8 women with no experience at all in the kitchen with complex trauma histories, is kind of destined for failure as a company in a company structure. And so what we then did is to kind of, we would say we'd be selling more meals and couldn't realize how come we're going backwards on our budget, until we started to have more of a detailed look at it. And then we decided to move the employment of the women under the actual foundation structure. And that would help to kind of make the 2 entities being able to function better. And I think the first thing we did was really, again, obviously the charity is a registered charity, an audited charity, and then with the company we wanted to make sure the company was also audited, just so it was all clear. We went to social traders to audit our books, And the third piece that we wanted to do is we worked with Minter Ellison, in fact, and they created this MOU which sat between the two organisations to make sure when things go wrong, because they will always go wrong, that there was a really strong piece of governance that sat in between those two structures, that the board of the foundation could view and could have proper governance over, and maintain that kind of framework. So that piece that we did with Minter Ellison, again, it was at arm's length as someone of a very reputable legal firm creating this MOU so that we could really better define what was happening within both entities and making sure that both sat at an arm's length.
That's great.
Yeah, I was just going to say, but things continue to evolve, and as I was mentioning earlier, as opportunities come up, and when we're trying to work out ways in which we can offer more employment outcomes, and one of the challenges that we have while we're starting to employ more people within our organisation is how do we find a safe space for them post to make sure that the pipeline, so the women that we get onto the program, that we leave them in a position where they are continual success. And so working with organisations and working with those structures to make sure that kind of pipeline can exist and be successful for the person on program.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Rob. That was a wonderful illustration. Nothing ever goes as you expect it.
No, nothing ever does. And also the other benefits having the dual entity is that when other things might present itself or opportunities come up that might not be on constitution, we're able to explore that. For instance, we derive a lot of our revenue from the SOAP of the corporate SOAP sales. Barangaroo and all of the Lend-Lease properties and Charter Hall properties all purchase our SOAP, which is great. There's revenue coming in, but we always have this thing around how do we have more social impact with least impact on the earth. And so we thought, well, actually, instead of continuing to sell plastic, why don't we create our own dispenser made out of ocean plastic? And we've done a heap of this R&D on this ocean plastic and a new dispenser and all that kind of stuff, which I wouldn't feel comfortable doing under with someone else's money or with money that we've fundraised. It's not typically on constitution, but it allows us to explore and perhaps have a higher risk profile that we typically would if we were operating under that pure charity entity.
That's super interesting. Give that flexibility that you've got and appetite for risk. I can see, Teresa, you've unmuted yourself. Do you have a comment on this point?
Yes. I think Too Good is a fantastic illustration of the governance tensions, because I think when you set up social enterprise, that might not actually be the front of mind, but I think it really does pay to think about it very clearly at the outset. So we've put in the information sheets just a list of the types of issues that you'll need to consider. And we're very lucky to have Prashant and Rob both here, but one of the issues we have mentioned is, the role of the founder and just issues around having an advisory board and a board of directors, and how you might sort of balance the founder plus all of your advisors. And also in a social enterprise, you'll probably have third-party stakeholders as well. So more perhaps than in a corporate, a strictly corporate situation, you might have additional people on your board from the communities that you're trying to serve. And that also plays into just straight governance issues like diversity, etc. It's always good to have as broad a range as possible. And also these governance issues will play into the finance as well. So financiers will always look at how strong your board is and your governance and all of those structures and how clear the arrangements are. Because you will need to take account of all those conflicts of interest, confidentiality issues. I'd also mention the Pollinate case study that we have in the toolkit. Pollinate's a really interesting organisation. It just had a lot of issues to cover because their operations are in Australia, India, the US, and Nepal. So you can just imagine the complexity. They had to have resident directors in India. They were an overseas aid gift deduction scheme. So there's all sorts of Australian requirements. When the founders were setting up this structure, they spent a lot of time on governance, and it was really quite a big job. It was eventually streamlined and they got more people in to help, but it really did take some effort. So there is quite a lot to consider in the governance piece, I think.
Thank you, Therese. That's great. And I want to pick up on one of the other points you mentioned as well about governance being important for investors, and investors looking at that as one of the many things that go into an investment decision, looking at the quality of the entrepreneur, the business, the competitor landscape, all sorts of things go into an investment analysis from investors. And I'm wondering if we can have Prashant comment on this a little bit, because there's been quite a few comments and questions from those in attendance in the registration process, specifically interested in your insights on raising finance, because you've done it successfully, Prashant. It's a topic that Social Impact Hub has run many other masterclasses and workshops on. How do you actually approach investors? How do you actually develop a compelling investment story? It's the subject of our whole Scaling Impact Accelerator, which some of the enterprises on the call have participated in or will participate in, which is all about getting impact investment ready. But I'm just interested if we can just take 1 minute of this webinar to pick your brain, Prashant, and hear your insights on dealing with investors, especially VCs, and how you went about landing that investment from Blackbird, and any tips or suggestions from your experience about how to approach investors.
Yeah, so I think let me talk about what it practically looked like for us to just kind of set people's expectations as well on what the process looks like. So we started at the start of, I think it was 2015, I went to, we decided that we were going to go down this path. We were still a charity at this point in time, which we were hedging our bets that if we couldn't raise money, then we wouldn't go through the problems of actually converting structure. I went to Nikki, who was the founder of, one of the founders of Blackbird at that point in time, and said, oh, look, I'm thinking about raising money from impact investors. I don't know how to pitch. Can you help me? And his response was, well, probably the best way of learning how to pitch is to pitch us, which was terrifying. And so I delivered my worst pitch to Blackbird, and they said no. And then I went and pitched 30, 50, 60 different people.
Wow. That's a good warning for everybody. And that's something we say to enterprises all the time. You're going to get a lot of no's. You've got to pitch to a lot, but it's wonderful to hear you bring that to life. Thank you.
I got a lot of no's. And then also just, the good thing was there was a lot of other entrepreneurs who helped coach me as well. And I realized what I was pitching wasn't great. And it even the look and feel wasn't great. I was still in kind of management consultant slide land. And by October, I want to say, we had opened up internationally across that year. We had kind of grown significantly. We'd kind of sold a bunch of challenges. I went back to Nikki and I was like, look, I'm not getting anywhere with this fundraising thing. But we've done a lot of good stuff this year. I'm thinking packing it in. He was like, well, it looks like you've kind of grown a lot since we last talked. How about you come back in and pitch us? And so we pitched on a Tuesday and we had a term sheet on Thursday. It's a bumpy, pretty bruising ride. What I kind of learned through the process was two things. One was like we pitched impact investors and tech VCs. I found the tech VCs a lot easier to pitch with. I think impact investments probably moved on since 2015, but I found the impact investors were like tended to follow rather than lead, tended to be more short-term money hungry, like wanted to returns quicker. And we're looking for businesses that were like had 10-year cash flow history, were profitable, and like could get a loan from a bank. And so the VCs were kind of much more in line with what we were trying to do, where it was kind of like risky and ambitious. And we wanted to kind of like try something bold. It didn't have like, large cash flow history. The other thing that I learned was like, in terms of the pitching, like it was actually really hard on like three things that they were looking for. One was, is this a real problem? Do they have a real solution? And like the best way of demonstrating that was traction. Like there are customers who are paying money to use this thing. The second was like, is there enough market for this to be like a $100 million business or a $1 billion business or whatever the threshold that they have in their head is? But like, is the market actually big enough? And the third was like, are these people the best people in the world to solve this problem? And that was kind of largely it. Like, and so we told our story kind of around those, and it was kind of pretty sharp around those. And that was like what got us the money. Like telling the story though to like a foundation was like wildly different. But like that was what, for a venture capital fund, like that's what they were looking for.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Thank you for sharing, Prashant. I think it's also really interesting for those of you that are considering operating as a hybrid or transitioning structures, just to take note of Prashant's point about the story you tell different people is very different. And that also goes to your expertise. I think Prashant and Rob, you guys both have navigated both worlds very successfully, the not-for-profit world and the for-profit world, but the language used is different. The way to pitch things is different. We also straddle both, and we see a lot of people who come from one world and want to move into the other, or from that world and want to move into that. And there's a major education exercise. So I just want to pick up on that point and not, we're putting you up in lights. You guys have done it really well, but it's not necessarily so easy for everybody. So I just thought
like we've done it well because we've done it badly for a long time. Right? Like you have to kind of just go through the process of like doing it badly until you do it well.
100% agree. Well, and I'm still kind of stripping over my toes.
Well, participating in something like this also gives you an opportunity to learn from each other and from other people, which is awesome. And I completely agree with your comment, Prashant, that the impact investment market has come quite a long way since you were pitching in 2015. So I wouldn't sort of have expressed too much caution on this call for everybody here. And there's quite a lot of our resilience grant enterprises and scaling impact enterprises who are considering pitching to impact investments. Pitching to impact investors, the market has come a long way. And even the masterclass that we did just a few weeks ago, talking to impact investors, they said that, and they also said very similar things to what Prashant said about what they're looking for in terms of the quality of the people executing, the size of the market and the opportunity, and the fact that there's some traction that shows that there is real product market fit. And that there's a real solution here that's addressing a real problem, and that also goes to the embedded impact. So that's very good that Prashant's insights from 6 years ago were verified just a few weeks ago from an impact investor panel that we had. I'm going to open it up for questions to the floor. So if you've got any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat. And we can, we'd love to hear from you. There's one from Jess, and if you've got other questions, feel free to pop them in the chat and I'll come to you. I'm wondering if I can ask Rob, while we have some questions coming in, what you learnt through your journey and what did you wish you would have known at the beginning? what would have saved you money or time that you know now that everyone on this call should know at the beginning of their journey?
Good question. So literally last week, right? Alan English said to me, because I had my problem. I wanted to talk with him, and that really was, our governance structure is really inefficient, and I want to go to a proper business consultant to work out how to make these entities the most profitable we can, so that we can drive impact. The way I talked to him and he picked this up was, I'm 100% in this game because of our impact. And I would never run a commercial catering company, and I would never sell soap unless it was for the women who we work with. So that's always going to be at the core. But, I love business and I love strategy and I love winning new business. And I like that kind of the innovation and I want to grow my business to support my family as well. And I've always been, worried that I'm, 44. I'm always been worried that, I'm going to have to rely on the service of Too Good, 10 years down the track, because I'm constantly kind of doing this and being charitable. And so, but but what really drives me is growing the organization so that we can do more. And so Alan said to me, write your own story, be who you are. The business is successful because of you're driving it the way. And I think if I had the confidence and clarity 5 years ago to really own up to who I was and to kind of be proud of I want this to be a business, and I want this to be a company, and really go hard on the business side of things that, oh, by the way, just has great social impact. I think I would have saved a lot of confusion and a lot of along the way. We've been to consultants who come up with these different structures, owned by where the charity owns everything, and we kind of almost went down that path. But when it came to the time, I didn't want to just be a board member with all of the skin in the game. I didn't want to hand over everything to a charity, and I think having the confidence and clarity in myself as someone in business would have certainly saved a lot of time and a lot of a lot less of kind of going around and trying to tiptoe around different concepts and ideas, and not being confident to say Too Good is a for-profit company, and often, and even five years ago, it was going, like, you mean profit for purpose, or what do you mean by that? Well, we're a social enterprise, but we at heart we're a business, and I want to have an amazing business that just does amazing work, social work. So I think that's kind of what I would have told myself 5 years ago.
And just to back up, Rob, on this, I've got friends who started really amazing charities about the same time as we started Chuffed, and they get to 5, 8 years, 10 years in, and they put in their heart and soul, work a lot harder than I have, and they've got 10 years of salary to show for it, and that's it, right? They walk away and they're starting from zero again. They have young families, they've got things that they want to do with their life, and this thing that they've built, they've got no personal reward for. And I think it's something that you're not allowed to talk about too loudly in the sector. But I think it's really important, because ultimately, I think that's the thing that builds longevity for the founders in there, that actually they've got some asset that they're building that they get some benefit from as well, and their family gets some benefit from. And I don't it's hard to be too upfront about that in the sector.
Yeah, it is hard. So I want to thank you both for being so honest and open and transparent about that, because I think that's really important. And it's interesting because on the business side of things, that's not controversial. VC firms and will look at how much equity founders have in a business. And that's
if you're too diluted on a seed round, they won't invest in you, because they're
that's right. And they will often want to put an employee share option plan in place, like an ESOP, to ensure that the founding team, not just the founder, is incentivized and will stay and see that through. And so it's really interesting you saying that, because that's not controversial in the business world, but it is often in the charity world.
Can I just jump in and add, Jess? I think
yes,
it's also really important for succession, because you're trying to create something that's going to keep on going, and that means there has to be somewhere someone else has to feel like they want to come and join, and they can join, and it's going to work for them as well.
Yeah, that's great. Can we stick with you, Michael? Jess Wolf, are you able to unmute yourself and ask your question? And then we'll come to you, Victor.
Sure. Thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfect.
Great. Yeah, I guess I was just wondering, Michael, you mentioned that you focused on the Constitution, and that's the core governing document. And I'm wondering what the shareholders agreement, I guess, what the role is in relation to the Constitution, and whether it's worth embedding purpose in the shareholders agreement as well.
Thanks. That's great. Absolutely, definitely worth putting purpose into the shareholders agreement. The shareholders agreement and Constitution form slightly different functions. They overlap a lot, but in a sort of really rough way, Constitution's a bit like it's the building the house. It's the house design. The shareholders agreement is what you're going to do in the house. They overlap. So the shareholders agreement says, we will go ahead, this will be our business plan, this is the way we're going to finance, this is what money we're going to draw, this is what we want to achieve in 5 years' time, this is what our exit's going to be, etc. Whereas the Constitution is going to say, I've created something where you can do all those things, and therefore you make sure the provisions are there to enable you to do it. But both of them should have the purpose. So absolutely put it in, and they both have a function to play. So you can get going with just a Constitution, and that will set yourself up and give you the capacity to do things. But it's often really useful to have the shareholders agreement, which then takes you through to what your plan is and where you're going to go.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much.
That's great. Thank you. Great question. Great answer. Victor, can we come to you?
Sure. Thanks, Jess, and thank you for the panelists for your time and expertise. I'm from Communitea. We're actually a PTY Ltd, and we've got a similar platform page, but focused on volunteering. Essentially, we surface a lot of not-for-profits, and then our paying customers are actually a corporate. So whilst we work really well together as a whole team of about 20 people, you can pretty much say half our team and half our resources are dedicated to the not-for-profits, and we don't charge them anything. So an idea that we had was always thinking about, well, we're not charging not-for-profits anything. We actually can't get most of the grants, but you can almost put all the resources that we're using to service not-for-profit in a shell of not-for-profit, and then that might actually attract some kind of funding, whether it's government or philanthropic. And I've always thought, okay, well, is there am I missing something here? Is that a logical move? Are there challenges? Is this too good to be true that I should have done this ages ago?
So we can't. So this is not about specific advice for Communitea, maybe because we can't do that on this call. But I think if we just lift it up a level and go to the broader structural question about a social enterprise, it's a PTY Ltd, adding a not-for-profit entity under its umbrella or by its side. And maybe we can just talk about at a broader level around the benefits and the challenges with that. Would you like to go first, Michael? Anyone else jump in?
Okay, I'll jump in with one thought, which is there are, as Rob's story of Too Good really shows, there are some tremendous benefits in having hybrid structures. Essentially, the way I see it is that the for-profit is there because it's able to create the funding and revenue and activity that supports what the not-for-profit is doing. If you're doing it that way, then the governance issues flow out more straightforwardly, because that's why the for-profit is doing things. But you do have to make sure you get that governance right. You do have to make sure that what the not-for-profit is doing is not-for-profit. It's structured as not-for-profit. The funding meets the requirements of the not-for-profit.
It's actually a great segue to the question from Jess from Earthworthy, who wants to ask about governance. I'm wondering if Rob and Prashant could maybe comment on this. Jess, can you ask your question?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm definitely at the early stages, still set up as a sole trader, working full-time while getting this business up and running. And all our resources are currently going into the operations of the business, and that's what keeps us going. So I'm just wondering how, maybe Rob or someone in those early days, how you sort of managed to do all that foundational work and have the capacity and the resources to do that.
Hustle. So I think don't ever underestimate the value that you can provide for people who want to assist in this. Like I'm no longer surprised by the amount of people that say yes to the work that where impact is at the core. That people are doing. Are in legal professions or doing great work in corporate sector, but we always kind of wanted to get involved with a social enterprise or have more purpose. So I think where we had success early was to help to sell that story to people who want to come on board and help and really kind of bring others on for the journey, especially at an early stage when you can sell your mission and sell your dream. It's a really powerful thing, and we had a lot of people help us just because they wanted to give back, and this was the way that they give back. So we kind of hustled for skilled volunteering and getting advice from different people.
I mean, we got pro bono legal for like all our constitution, sorry, not the constitution stuff, like the charity constitution stuff, not the PTI limited constitution stuff. I mean, the other thing to balance off, I don't know, Rob, when you actually started doing this, it's like, my kind of short answer would be like, we didn't do any government stuff at the start, because like, to me, like, I always think about like, what is the risk of like, what's like the major risk around this? And like normally at the start, the major risk is like, you just don't have a business. And like, nobody wants to buy the thing that you're selling because it's not like good enough, or it's not the right thing, or you're solving the wrong problem, or you're thinking about it in the wrong way. And so like, we took the view that like having too much infrastructure early on would slow us down. And then there's a point where you get to where like actually not having enough infrastructure slows you down. But yeah, like, I don't know, like if you have no product and you have no customers, I wouldn't spend money on governance, but others might.
No, I agree. So certainly we're focusing more on our business and bringing the revenue in and creating work, and less on the foundation and governance. Always being aware of what was going on, but there's certainly, we're still pulling policies from Google now, and so there's certainly the foundation and the governance will build as you grow and as you chip away at it. But yeah, we're keeping the eye on the business and the revenue and where the next kind of funding might come from, and that was more of the important part looking back. And it's still, still now we've just got more people helping out in governance, but it's continuing to get stronger. And as we pitch more work, we have to come up with new policies and we kind of build those in on the fly a bit, to be honest. That's how we're doing it.
That's actually really reassuring that we can build it.
Don't tell everyone. Don't tell us, that's confidential.
That's how it's happening here, so that's fine.
Thank you both for being so honest and sharing. I think that's fabulous. And I might just add one other point. Many of the early stage social enterprises that we work with, to Prashant's point, in the early days, having too much governance can actually slow you down. So it's good to keep it nimble and lean. But one way in which you bridge that gap often is by having an advisory board, where you get to actually bring in advisors with expertise that you don't have as a founder, but it's not so formal a governance structure that it really slows you down. So that can be a midway point, going from a solo founder to bring in an advisory board and then professionalizing and putting in place proper governance. So I think I just want to throw that in as a middle ground for that's suitable for some social entrepreneurs. I'm wondering, Prashan, maybe to you, to Rob, as a last question, what is there one factor that stands out as the most important to take into account when you're determining the best way to structure your social enterprise? What would your advice be? Maybe, Rob, any parting comments?
Yeah, I mean, to me, a big part of it, and it's not the only thing, but a big part of it is like about whose money you're going to take. You know, your answer to that can vary a lot by, you know, what are you comfortable with, and like, what do you have experience in, and like, what are you happy to do, and like, what are the kind of tags that come along with taking that money. But to me, that like often determines your structure from a very kind of high level. And then underneath that, there is the like, what is the outcome that you're playing for in like 10 years time? Because normally these things are like a decade of your life, at least. And so like at the end of 10 years, are you happy to like walk away from it, or like transition to being a director? Or like, do you want to be kind of like building an asset that you kind of personally benefit, at least like in part from?
That's wonderful advice. Thank you, Prashan. Parting words from you, Rob?
No, I was going to say exactly, but in fact, Prashan told me that same thing about 5 years ago when I was starting. I was trying to work out which way to go. And he said, "Where are you going to get your revenue from?" And I was like, and I've used his line a few times to try to be smart when people ask me, "Oh, where are you going to get your revenue from?" So it's a good thing his advice hasn't changed.
Credit Prashan for that line.
Yeah,
no, so plagiarized it.
Yeah, exactly. So, but also, you know, go deep, and where, you know, what do you want? Like really, you know, often we get into this thing because we want to solve a problem for the community, but being very conscious of what you want as well, and going deep and answering that, and certainly having some self-reflection, some confidence and clarity around who you are and where do you want to be in 10 years or 5 years, and going hard then.
Brilliant. What wonderful parting words from our fabulous social entrepreneurs. Thank you so much for joining us. A massive round of applause. Thank you. Can unmute ourselves and clap. Thank you very, very much. Now, in our final 5 minutes, I'm going to share my screen and give you all a preview of the Legal Toolkit. So here we go. I'm going to show it to you on the Social Impact Hub website. It's also on the Centre for Social Finance Law website. So you can check it out on either website and have a play around. So it's on the Social Impact Hub website. It's under initiatives. The Legal Toolkit is one of our initiatives. You can scroll down and you'll see it just here on the right-hand side, Social Enterprise Legal Toolkit. And then you'll get here to the landing page, Social Enterprise Legal Toolkit. And we explain here the central focus of this legal toolkit. It's focused on supporting for-profit, for-purpose enterprises. It contains a wide range of information that's useful for you, for anyone that's sitting between the solely not-for-profit and the solely financially driven. And you can see here, there are 3 template documents that are available for download. There's a constitution, there are discussion notes, there's a structure diagram, and the features of the constitution. I'll show you what these look like in a moment. You just click here to download. There are 3 case studies that are currently live. There's the Chuffed case study, which you heard about today. You can go in and you can read more about Chuffed if you want to see more of the story from Prashan and Chuffed. It's all here. So have a look. You can also click in and have a look at Rob. And read about their story and how they solve the problem and how the hybrid structure works. And then there's also the case study here from Alexi and Pollinate group. And we'll add some more case studies as well. So have a look through those. Those are all just accessible on the homepage of the toolkit. And then we go into the information sheets. So there are 5 information sheets. The first one talks you through the pros and cons of all the various legal structures. The second one is on hybrid structures. The third is on governance. The fourth is on raising finance. And the fifth is on certification options. And you just click here to download. When you click to download, you'll get a pop-up. You just need to put in your name, your email, and your organization. It's all free. There's no paywall. You just put in your contact details. And once you do that, a new page will load that looks like this. Thank you, Jay. This is the template documents that you can download here. The Constitution will download as a Word document. And you can then take that, and in reviewing the discussion notes and the structure diagram, you can take this Constitution and amend it for your own purposes. There are instructions as to how to use it on page 2. When you've reviewed the instructions and you've completed the document, just delete page 1 and 2, and your Constitution can start here from page 3. So you pop your name of the company in here, your ACN. Actually, not sure if you can see that on my screen.
No.
That's how the Constitution works. Maybe because it's a Word. Sorry, I can come back to that. The discussion notes are here. There you go. So if you click on that, those will come up. You should be able to see that, the discussion notes. And that explains all about the different aspects of the Constitution, how the mission lock is embedded, how the social purpose is embedded. All your questions, if you like. This is a list of frequently asked questions that it's addressed here. Then I'm going to try and move all my smiling faces away so I can see. And here's the for-profit and for-purpose template structure. And we've tried to actually explain the features, comment on each feature so you can see how we've suggested addressing it and how different sections of the Constitution actually implement these features in practice. And then if you click through here and you want to go to the information sheets, they're all downloadable here. You just click on each one and they load. There's information sheet 1, choosing the right legal structure. And this goes through the pros and cons of all the different building blocks that we have in Australia and as applied to social enterprises. And we also suggest that you have a look at Justice Connect's Social Enterprise Guide. They've got a fabulous resource on their website that's just been updated, their Social Enterprise Guide that's just here. And that will help you also with the right choice of legal structure. And we haven't tried to duplicate existing resources. We've tried to fill a gap here. So have a look at the Justice Connect guide in parallel with information sheet 1. Information sheet 2 talks through some of the governance. Sorry, I skipped 1. Information sheet 2 talks about hybrid structures, which we heard from Rob all about, and explains some of the pros and cons and how that works. So if you want to refresh on some of what Rob mentioned today, have a look at information sheet 2. Information sheet 3 talks through the governance considerations, which you heard about from Therese and also from Rob, and gives you some of the considerations and the issues, especially in a hybrid form, how you balance the social and financial, how you recruit board members, managing stakeholders, conflicts of interest, different entities with different boards. And then information sheet 4 is specifically on raising finance, which we heard from Prashan about. And this gives you some basic information about the types of finance you could raise, who might be able to invest, and impact investment as well. And then the last information sheet is about independent certification options. And we're talking there about social traders certification and B Corp certification. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of a whiz through. If you want to repeat today's, listen to the recording from today, it'll be posted here on the RISE workshop series recordings page. You can see here all of the recordings of all the previous RISE workshops, and feel free to register for the future RISE workshops every Friday on a fortnightly basis. you can register. They're all for free, and they'll be running till the end of the year on all sorts of different topics. So the recording from today will go live there, and register for future RISE workshops. So thank you all so much for coming. We are so thrilled that so many of you gave up an hour and a half of your Friday to come and hear this. From our wonderful panelists, I want to thank Rob, thank Prashan. I want to thank Michael for his collaboration. I want to thank Therese, and I want to thank the whole Social Impact Hub team that's been involved in putting this together. Rob Haggett's on the line. He's been coordinating the whole RISE workshop series. Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Jay, for putting it, our fabulous marketing and comms, making the website look so beautiful. Thank you, Mia, who's also on the line and who had original carriage of this project. Thank you, Helen, and all of the students that have worked on it. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Have a lovely rest of the afternoon. Thank you.